A couple months ago, I had the urge to reinstall Skyrim, which is an urge that a lot of you are probably familiar with. But of course, I wasn't just going to reinstall vanilla Skyrim. What would be the point of that? I mean, it was very impressive when it came out in 2011, but it's not 2011 anymore, and I'm not a boy in high school who had fallen in love with the fantasy genre primarily because of the Elder Scrolls Oblivion. Nowadays, I need more stuff, more substance, more content. Which, to be fair, I would have liked back then as well, but I understood that just wasn't really on offer. So I did what any self-respecting gamer would do and installed 2,500 mods. Which sounds a lot more daunting than it really was. I got a curated mod pack called Elysium. The only complaint I have about it, really, that actually kind of pisses me off is that all of the women look like Barbie dolls. And it has been my most fun Skyrim playthrough yet. There is hundreds, if not thousands of hours of gameplay in that mod pack. And this is exclusively stuff that isn't in the base game. Everything is so much more interesting. Every time I play, I discover something new. And I've been playing this a lot. There was a time when I was an irresponsible amount of Skyrim being played in this household. Forget all the multitude of quests and monsters and fully voiced NPCs. All the large-scale changes, like every single individual little ass town having its own particular identity reflected in the layout and style of its architecture. No more 3 of the major cities got all of their houses from the IKEA in Rorikstead. It's the little things that just add so much in terms of immersion, like diversity in fruit textures and labeled books. A vast array of sound effects that can make the hair stand up on my back, not just in the darkest of dungeons, but just in the middle of the Reach. A lot of things where someone just went, this is some that barely anyone even notices, and I'm going to expend a significant amount of time to improve it. All in all, there is an order of magnitude more content in this mod pack than Skyrim, with all its expansions. Significantly more hours of labor and, dare I say, love sunk into it. And all it cost me was a month of Nexus Mods Premium, just to make the installation process a little less tedious. I didn't have to purchase that, I chose to, and it felt worth it. Which is a feeling that I realized I had sorely missed with video games in general. I've put a lot of hours into that playthrough, and I have barely scratched the surface of what is there. But what does any of this have to do with socialism, or, even Minecraft for that matter? Well, here is my central thesis for this video. The fact that I was able to experience all of that disproves one of the most fundamental axioms that capitalism fans like to posit. The only reason people do things and create stuff is profit incentive. They especially like to bring up the great people who go the extra mile, the act of going the extra mile, something that can only happen if there's a profit incentive. Inventors. Oh, the sublime, exalted inventor who would never have done any sort of inventing if there hadn't been the possibility of becoming incredibly rich from it. You think even the most successful modders, in terms of receiving Patreon donations, make as much as securely as just a random person working at Bethesda? And this is considering that Bethesda, being part of the hellish cesspool that is the video games industry, probably doesn't really pay its employees all that well for the amount of work and the working conditions that they suffer under, and obviously doubly not for the amount of profit that it generates. And those modders do all of that shit for free. They're investing skill and countless hours of labor into a product that they are not even selling. They are making it simply because they want it to exist. And they do this in a system that not only strongly disincentivizes people from doing literally anything for free for any reason ever, but often actively punishes you for doing so. In our paycheck to paycheck society, that's a whole bunch of lost opportunity cost right there. You could be doing, I don't know, overtime, provided of course that overtime is paid. And also of course provided that your boss will actually pay you what you are owed instead of just not doing that. Wage theft is, after all, a huge problem. Not to mention the cost of electricity and running the servers, getting the tools to do the thing in the first place. A lot of that is, of course, shouldered by the Nexus Mods website, but it's certainly not covered by like a basic living allowance that the people who put in that work have. And no, Patreon donations do not in fact count as a profit incentive in the capitalist sense. Those are not profit generated from selling a product. They are donations, like the kind of thing that these kinds of organizations we call non-profits are. They are entirely voluntary. Maybe you get like a minute bonus. Do not expect things to be simple and clear-cut. This is, after all, the real world. Generating an income this way is actually a core part of many socialist models and many anarchist ones as well. Such a model is significantly more viable in such a system as well because the average worker has a lot more financial security and disposable income in them. Whereas, of course, the capitalist model relies on leaving the worker very little disposable income and generating as little financial security as possible. Balancing the need of having a class of consumers you can squeeze for money with overpriced products with having a class of laborers that will produce those products for you for the worst, aka cheapest labor conditions that you can get away with. Every dollar you pay your workers is a dollar you lose in profit. And generating the maximum amount of profit is how you are best at doing capitalism. It's interesting to see the inversion of content accessibility too, because in the last few years especially, the video game industry has focused desperately on supplying the barest trickle of bonus content for the largest amount of microtransactions possible. To the point where they actually straight up implemented gambling mechanics in games meant for actual legitimate children in the hopes that they would get addicted to them. Bonus unlockable content used to just ship with games. Huge expansions used to just be a thing. The model switched from giving you something that would satisfy you with the purchase to giving you very little for too much money so you felt dissatisfied and would purchase more in hopes that another additional purchase would leave you more satisfied. These corporations just got better at making video games. No, sorry, that wasn't the line. They got better at capitalism is what I was trying to say. They got better at capitalism. Meanwhile, modders have just been producing unfathomable quantities of bonus content for absolutely free, with the option of giving them $1 on Patreon. You might get like an earlier release or beta access to a mod that is unstable if you're really passionate about this particular thing. Which, if you support me on Patreon, for instance, isn't something that you get. There's barely any, but you might get like Discord roles, but you should still support me on Patreon. The industry, organized in a more capitalist manner, attempts to induce psychological addiction mechanisms in children. The modding scene, organized in a more socialist manner, creates vast amounts of stuff that people actually want to see in their games for free, with the option of giving them $1 on Patreon. And really the best example of all of this in action is Minecraft. Yeah, Skyrim modding is very impressive, but have you fucking seen Minecraft modding? I got Minecraft back in the day during beta. It tickled all the right nerve endings for me. Much like Skyrim, it is one of my all-time favorite games. The degree and balance of exploration and creativity you have is just perfect. But because I have always been a dreamer, even back then I had visions of not just what Minecraft was, but what Minecraft could one day be. I had all these dreams of like vehicles that you could actually build and then fly, airships specifically. I was huge on airships back in the day, and submarines. Vibrant, active ecosystems full of interesting critters. Strange biomes, ancient secrets, portals to all manner of weird planes. Not to mention the idea that you could just turn Minecraft into any kind of game with any kind of theme imaginable, like survival in a post-apocalyptic wasteland where it was just really tough to make it from one day to the next. Vast sci-fi adventurescapes where you could build your own spaceships and fly to alien planets. Complex systems of alchemy and magic. Every weekend, which is when I usually had access to the internet, I would post on the Mojang forums with all the ideas that I had for features that I wanted to see implemented in the game. I was really passionate. And looking at Minecraft today, I can scarcely believe it because it's such a dream come true. Every single one of the wild ideas that I had that I was told were completely impossible to realize are now in the game. Today, Minecraft is exactly what my no idea about anything 15-year-old self dreamt it could be. And much more than that, it also fits with the visions of countless other people that had very different and sometimes even mutually incompatible visions with my own. Slight caveat, if you use mods. That is. It is that way if you use mods. Minecraft mod packs are famous for augmenting the game by several orders of magnitude of content. They're pretty much infinitely customizable. And all that was made by a disparate community, I suppose, of modders that hang out sometimes on Discord and have like somewhat informal associations that are not defined anywhere. There's easy to install mod packs for like pretty much any playstyle that you would prefer that are curated by someone who just took the hassle out of modding a game like that out for you. They did this effectively for free out of passion because they wanted to. The only thing you have to pay for when you want modded Minecraft is the actual base game itself, which provides only a tiny fraction of the content that you are actually going to be enjoying. Meanwhile, what has Mojang been up to? Mojang, the billion-dollar game studio with the best-selling video game of all time, owned by one of the biggest, richest, most influential corporations in the entire world and the history of humanity, employing full-time some of the most elite programmers and engineers and designers to dedicate their entire lives to Minecraft. They made Minecraft, but now it has microtransactions for things that used to be free, like, skins and texture packs. And I'm gonna be real with you, they're not even all that good. That's what they made. That's what the ones who literally make all of the money made. The same is true about Skyrim, by the way. Bethesda made what? ESO? Elder Scrolls Online? I don't play MMOs at all. I don't like them. I suppose some people do. And from what I've heard, it is one of the better MMOs, but it's still mainly just a vehicle for dragging money out of your pocket by making you feel like you are missing out on something. Because remember, if you ever feel satisfied playing the game, you will stop spending money. They've also been just re-releasing Skyrim every year, and literally even to this day, every time it comes out, it ships with bugs that modders had fixed within hours of the original 2011 release without access to any of the modding tools. The reason for this is simple and transparent. The modders are trying to make the best possible game, and the corporations are trying to make the most amount of profit. Obviously, these two goals are mutually incompatible in a real, demonstrable, observable way. Specifically because there isn't a profit incentive. People are putting in the time and love to make the best possible game. And I really cannot stress enough how much of a miracle it is that any of these mod packs work at all. A lot of the people who follow this channel work in IT just because, a lot of people work in IT these days, and they will be able to tell you how little the average IT person knows about literally anything outside of their immediate IT experience. Under the very best of circumstances, IT is a jumbled mess of mysterious code hiccups and incompatible software standards. The world's best couples therapist would be blown away by the worst IT's person ability to get things to talk to each other. For a huge part, software making is just like bug hunting and trial and error type shit. Even for programmers who made a piece of software, they wrote the code, half of what they do might as well be fucking magic. They know the spells, but they don't know how they work. That entire field of knowledge, that entire meta-complex of industries relies on the open exchange of information where you can go to a number of internet forums and ask any kind of incredibly stupid question in the hopes that someone with access to that infinitesimal slice of total IT knowledge will find that question and answer it in a way that you can implement, not necessarily understand. It is a vast, infinitely complex field of knowledge that I am sure if anyone were ever able to grasp it in its totality, it would be an H.P. Lovecraft going mad from gazing into the infinite eyes of Cthulhu type situation. And even in the context of all that, video games are the most taped together at the seams nuclear reactor flying through an asteroid field at a fraction of light speed type shit. Even the most polished game is an absolute mess under the hood. And that is with a team of experts who are very good at doing that kind of thing, tightly coordinating to create a product that functions. With modding and mod packs, which once again are the majority of any good game now, it's a complete democratized hive mind experience. Software standards outside of the very core of systems are agreed upon by consensus, and not everyone follows that consensus or follows that consensus to the same extent. There are a lot of people in that scene doing a lot of work just to make sure that things, work. And not only are the results functional, they are so often far superior to the stuff that the AAA megacorporations produce. I mean, Jesus Christ, if you look at like a significant fraction of video games, especially from big name publishers that have come out these past couple of years, a lot of them just do not work. They ship broken. They don't function. The reason for this is that the money people want more money, all the money, all of the money, give the money, more money, all money, complete money right now, this second, all of the money. And those are the people that these games are made for, not the people who buy them. And yet, even in a capitalist society that actively tries to stamp out such systems, socialist principles of consensus organization produce far more functional and experientially superior product. The outcomes are just better. Imagine if these people had more time and resources on their hands, or were maybe actually able to, organize. And if the people who gave them donations had more disposable income, as I already said, less financial worries. Because that is what the goal of people who call themselves socialists generally is. And look, I know a lot of people in the comments right now are contorting themselves into human pretzels, trying to go through the mental gymnastics of somehow giving capitalism the credit for a thing that capitalist institutions have been actively trying to stomp out for a long time now. But there's really not much of a point to trying to convince the myopic and the intellectually dishonest? Nobody can say I didn't try. The simple fact of the matter is that the capitalist system we live under incentivizes the thing that produces inferior results. Socialists would prefer the thing that produces superior results. But oh no, consensus-based democratic politics by people who know actually what the fuck is going on as opposed to ideology-driven party power politics isn't what I was told the Soviet Union was like. That is true. It wasn't. But we're not trying to make the Soviet Union here, we're trying to make socialism. Those two are pretty much mutually incompatible, kinda like making good games and capitalism. But that whole level of discourse too is going to spark a lot of very angry 5,000 word comments down below, which are going to be great for me and the algorithm. But that's not actually a conversation I am going to engage in because I cannot be fucked to participate in ideological sectarianism. Now, some of you might say, yeah, sure, all of that is great, and these modders are clearly heroes. But they wouldn't have been able to do any of that without the solid and stable foundation of Skyrim and Minecraft existing. Which is a fair enough objection, but I think it's kind of putting the cart before the horse a little bit. For any human endeavor that requires large amounts of expertise labor, you need a certain critical mass of experts who are willing to put in that labor. And the fact of the matter is, if you have a game by a big brand name publisher with a huge marketing budget, to bring about like a very common analogy for this kind of thing, that's already kind of a big snowball right out of the gate. It starts out with easier access to a bigger expert community. It's a big snowball, it's going to acquire more snow more quickly. All these loose assemblies of modders do in theory have the expertise to create their own engine and game. They could do that. I mean, the original Minecraft was made by one guy. And organization is an emergent property of the snowball. It's much more difficult to stomp something out of the ground like that from scratch. Capital does have a distinct advantage here when it comes to grabbing that initial attention, but it isn't an ability that it has a monopoly on. It's really just something that's the case because that's the way society works right now. It has been done by others. In a sense, it's how a lot of game studios started, where people wanted to make something and then eventually they were bought and then they stopped making good things. Most modding studios, though, usually started around making some kind of major mod they slowly assembled over time for some major game. However, just because something precedes another thing doesn't mean that that other thing wouldn't have happened in some other form, influenced by different things. If you build a house on a plot of land where construction had happened previously, which for instance in cities is actually rather the norm, the way you design and construct your structure is going to be influenced by what remains of the things that were there before. That doesn't mean they deserve credit or that without them that wouldn't have happened. It would have just been different. In perhaps a somewhat more topical example, we don't give Jules Verne, Mary Shelley, and H.P. Lovecraft credit every time someone writes a science fiction story, and we don't give them money either. We do historically recognize them as the genre founders of science fiction, but every new work created by a creative is its own creation. And even these genre founders are only that in retrospect. They too were influenced by the things that preceded them. Calling any point the point where a new genre happened is ultimately arbitrary. It's an illusion. It's not actually true. The very idea that you have to give money to things that preceded you was invented by rich people who owned a lot of shit and wanted to be paid for owning a lot of shit. And they were usually not, in fact, the creators of the shit that was owned. Experts in creative labor, and pretty much all people who work in IT are experts in creative labor. Information technology is creative labor. When they truly go out there to achieve great things, they do it because they are driven to achieve those great things. Just like the modders, we have already demonstrated this. It's also a known fact that the games industry, and actually many creative industries, probably most of them, has a tendency of exploiting the passion of the people who work for them, who do that because they want to make something cool and creative in order to subject them to poor labor conditions. If you want to control driven creatives, you basically need to hold their passion hostage. As a matter of fact, most game studios actually ban their developers from engaging in any kind of modding by use of copyright, NDA, and non-compete clauses. So the people making all those mods are not even the most qualified industry professionals. And as should be obvious by now, the titans of industry that make all the money off of that work that's been performed are not the people who actually made those things. Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk do not have the expertise to make rockets. Or, maintain a website, make electric cars, whatever the fuck. Let's stick with the rocket analogy for now. If these billionaires had been properly taxed, aka out of existence, and the money that they had been taxed had been added to NASA, the people who went to them to build rockets for them would have instead built those self-landing rockets at a bigger NASA. The main difference would be that the goals of their organization would be influenced a lot less by the very fragile ego of a sociopathic bookseller. People don't generally become rocket engineers because they think it'll make them rich. They do it because they like rockets. This holds up for most scientists, by the way. Science does not really pay all that well. And the people who get into these fields, they tend to be pretty smart. They understand that they won't make themselves rich, they will make someone else rich, but they really want to do the thing. Which, by the way, I don't know what you do for a living, but it involves making someone else rich. And instead of the patents being kept private so that the rich people can become even more richer, they would have been accessible to the general public, boosting the economy, productivity, general wealth, and innovation. Because that's what NASA does with the shit that it invents. Not that most privately funded research isn't funded mainly through taxpayer government grants. It's only the profits that get privatized. The reason people like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos are part of this rocket-making process is not because they actually contribute anything except for a small fraction of the money that they have, even though they didn't actually earn it. It's because people who are like them set up the system to be that way. It's not a fact of nature, it's a socially constructed mirage. In practice, these businesses would function just as well, if not better, if they were worker-owned cooperatives. Because then the people who are actually driven to make those rockets would actually have a fucking say. To bring all of this back to gaming though, you could make the argument that the business strategy of a lot of these game developers is to make money off the free labor that modders perform for their games, and that is a philosophical realm that I'm not entirely willing to get into, but regardless of whether or not that's their intention, that is what they are doing. They are benefiting from it. And while some have gone very far to try and completely destroy modding, others have decided to lean into it. Some of these leanings, if you will, have been more cynical than others. For instance, the reason Valve games like Garry's Mod and Team Fortress 2 are still massive with very active communities is because all of the content that is generated for those games is largely community-driven, down to the very game modes themselves. And the games have vast tools to allow for that sort of creativity. Valve knows that so long as it leaves the servers running, the community will basically generate content and push forward the games on their own, which is reflective of Valve's general corporate philosophy. It's still a steady stream of income, although not one that is maximized for growth, which in the current economic climate is a bit of a problem because growth is all that investors are really interested in. Especially in the technology sector, this has actually killed a ton of completely viable businesses, but that's a topic for another video. Pistons in Minecraft, they were originally a mod, and I remember all that being a very, very interesting time. And then you have shit like Bethesda trying to actually directly make money off the work of its modders by introducing mods that you had to pay for. Yeah, you remember Creation Club in Steam Workshop? You remember. We remember, certainly. We're not gonna forget. Yes, the modders would have gotten a piece of that revenue, but so would Steam and Bethesda, even though they didn't really have that much of a hand in making those mods beyond the bare minimum. And let me tell you, the share that they would have taken for themselves simply because they could was not reflective of that bare minimum. But hey, what are you gonna do? That's just the entitled free lunch mentality that capitalists have. Now, Creation Club didn't really work, even though they tried very hard to make it work, down to saying absurd shit like, "No, look, this is not paid mods. We are not introducing paid mods. This is regular mods, but you have to pay for them." But the community backlash was just too much, not just from the players, but also from the modders. You know, the people who worked for free, who would have then had the opportunity to make money. The overwhelming majority of them saw exactly what Bethesda was trying to do. They knew they would have to compromise the quality of their work and switch to a vastly inferior distribution service that is Steam Workshop, as opposed to the more established, more open, more controlled by the consensus Nexus mods. They could already see that this move would in the long term harm their creative freedom and the modding ecosystem as a whole, making it less interesting and less diverse, and prone to the kind of institutional shenanigans that come with endeavors that are trying to make rich people, in this case Bethesda's owners, even richer. They weren't going to pay for the privilege of having performed free labor for their game. So they said, fuck you, I care more about making a good product than whatever the fuck scheme you're trying to pull off. I'm not doing it. That is how passionate these people are. Now you might, if you are reaching at this point, say that actually these modders do have an incentive, and though that incentive may not necessarily be money, it most certainly is fame. They wouldn't be modding if it wasn't for the fame and admiration they received, so the old capitalist truism still works. Look, I don't know if you're aware of this, but Dr. Farty Bart Fart 1986 is not quite as famous as, say, Brad Pitt. Shocking, I know. You're seriously underestimating how famous these people actually are. Speaking as someone who is that, being a niche internet micro-celebrity isn't actually all it's cracked up to be. Not to mention, I personally know several modders who utterly hate the attention, which is a common trait in people who do something because they want to do that thing to a high level, which I think ultimately boils down to there being a spectrum among just general society, most humans, of people who want to be famous and people who are utterly horrified at the idea of being famous. But also, modding is far from the only place in society, and online specifically, where people expend vast amounts of time and labor, and sometimes even their own personal resources, to do something that is of benefit to general society. And in some of these places, the people doing that are even more anonymous than in modding. You ever hear of this website called Wikipedia? Yeah. Everyone, and I do mean every single article in every language that Wikipedia features, was researched, structured, written, and edited by someone or a group of someones who did that with absolutely no expectation of compensation. Every word written on Wikipedia is something that a volunteer did. And they did that because they wanted to put that knowledge out in the world. And Wikipedia is absolutely free. You don't have to pay for it. There's no Wikipedia Plus, no Wikipedia Premium, no limit to the articles that you could to read every day. They don't track and sell your browsing data, and there's no ads. Like, there's literally not a single ad on all of Wikipedia. Which makes sense, really, because keeping Wikipedia ad-free is a matter of integrity. You think Nestle would like to advertise in Wikipedia if they didn't delete the controversy section on the Nestle Wikipedia page? That's why they have those, like, annoying banners popping up every once in a while. Wikipedia is one of the most perused websites on the internet, hosting vast quantities of data. They have insane amounts of traffic. Running those servers is hella expensive, but they refuse to make money. It is the largest, most comprehensive repository of knowledge in all of human history, created entirely by a consensus of volunteers and always accessible to anyone with an internet connection. Yet, when we think about it, it's as mundane as a light bulb. Yeah, just fucking go on Wikipedia. If you want to know something, go to the Wikipedia page. It's right there. It's so easy. Now, there are some criticisms of Wikipedia, but they don't really hold up, I think. People say that Wikipedia is biased, but outside of some, like, very contentious political articles where you yourself are probably quite biased, it really isn't. And you can't even say that it's biased in a particular direction. It's a consensus that makes those articles. There's opinions of all kinds of people in there. And for all the many attempts of injecting propaganda into that repository, of which there are many, this consensus is actually extremely good at sorting that out and getting rid of it, based on very solid scientific and journalistic principles. Every once in a while, you do need to ask yourself whether what you are currently reading at this point in time is, quite entirely accurate. But if you're not doing that anyway, with, like, pretty much everything you read, I don't know what to tell you. If there's disagreement on something, you're gonna read about that disagreement on Wikipedia. It just will not generally tell you which of the sides is right.
No, Mummy, help me. They expect me to think for myself instead of having someone else think for me.
I hate to break it to you, but all of those legitimate encyclopedias, they also have biases, and many of them do advertise or are otherwise influenced by the rich people that own them and use them to make money. 15 years ago, maybe you might have said that using Wikipedia as a source of information, little bit questionable. But in the year of our Lord 2022, that's kinda only and exclusively bias against consensus-based information gathering. You're setting very different standards for these kinds of institutions, which is unsurprising because we are primed from a very early age to perceive things that somebody rich is making money off of as more legitimate. Another criticism that I hear on Wikipedia is that all of the knowledge that is on the website is just taken from other sources, articles, books, papers that other people wrote. Which, if that is your criticism of the thing, that just kind of betrays a general lack of understanding of how this kind of thing works. Disregarding for a moment the fact that doing topical research is actually very difficult and time-consuming, the people who wrote those books that are cited on Wikipedia also did that. You cannot copyright knowledge. It's not possible. And that is important. It is essential to the functioning of society, because imagine if you could copyright the fact that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. Then no one could do any research based on that fact without paying you money? Or think about journalism. You couldn't report on events that happen because the people who made those events happen would have the copyright on the information of them having happened. Well, you can't talk about that war crime because this and that government owns the copyright to the war crime. can't talk about it. They're not selling the rights to it. Which, by the way, as an aside, there's this thing where if you read newspaper articles about shit that you actually are knowledgeable about, you notice that a lot of what is written there is actually wrong. But you don't think of it that way when it comes to articles that do not pertain to the specific field of knowledge that you are an expert in. In Wikipedia, you and everyone else who is an expert on something can read the thing, see that it is inaccurate, and change it to being correct. Now, don't misunderstand me here. Capitalists have for a long time tried to copyright knowledge, especially knowledge produced by people that they have power over. Ask anyone who ever does any kind of scientific research, and they will confirm that scientific publishers are absolute vampire hyenas who will strategically drive people to suicide for downloading a few papers that they had a license to download. There's actually a bit of a war going on right now where universities are boycotting certain scientific publishers for their business practices. It's just another of the many places where capitalists are stalling progress because they're trying to extract money from it. Not to mention that most of the people who wrote the books that are used as sources on Wikipedia are driven compilers of knowledge themselves. If they didn't have to pay bills, if they could just have the standard of living that they have and they didn't have to write those books, they would probably still be writing those books. And they tend to like it when their work is cited on Wikipedia. And in spite of all this, when you picture a Wikipedia editor in your mind, one of the greatest heroes of civilization ever, what do you see? Personally, I find it really strange that we are sort of programmed almost to see someone who expends vast amounts of personal time to just do something that is of objective benefit to all of humanity as like a basement-dwelling nerd who gets no pussy. Wikipedia editors in like the pecking order are maybe one step above Reddit mods. And finally, because I know some idiot is gonna bring this up and think it's like a gotcha, I'm going to address this. The principle behind this, that people will do great things not for a profit incentive, but because they want to do it, of course, only applies to work that people actually want to do. Which, yes, that is true, that is the case. That's not what this video is about. That's a completely different topic. This is about work people want to do, not about work that people don't want to do. This is also not to say that people who enjoy a certain type of labor should be expected to perform that labor for free. I'm just saying that they would do it. The thesis that was addressed here is the idea that people will do great things only for profit incentive, which is demonstrably untrue. And as a bonus, we got the fact that we can observe that doing all that shit for a profit incentive actually reduces the quality of the product. Do not misconstrue this as me saying people should not get paid for their work. If you'd need to slap a political label on me, you'd probably call me a socialist. My entire ideology is all about people getting paid for their work. What we can clearly see here, though, is that even in the places where money could and should be made, it would be much better organized as a worker-owned cooperative. That would still leave plenty of people doing plenty of work just because they like contributing something, which once again does not count as a profit incentive in the capitalist sense, if you are intellectually honest. When it comes to work people don't want to do, very few will actually do that recreationally. And all of that needs to be shouldered by people who are appropriately compensated. There's a lot of people out there whose entire livelihood essentially depends on them having to do shit that they don't actually want to do. Some of these things are just necessary for society to function, in which case in most places they are taken care of by the public sector. And when they're not, you have been propagandized into seeing those jobs as dirty and lower class, because that way the people who make them have less prestige and are more easily exploited by people who want to make a profit off of the necessity that these jobs need to be done. Or, and I reckon this actually constitutes the overwhelming majority of jobs that people don't actually want to do, they exist solely because society is structured completely around rich investors being able to make more money. You know, like working in a call center that is nominally there for tech support for defective products that were shipped because they kind of slacked on the QA and the quality, but your actual job, and you cannot really give them tech support, is to sell them more products. Programming bullshit microtransaction systems into video games. You think game developers are like, yeah, this is so much fun, I love doing this. Dumping toxic waste into pristine rivers. These are just some, maybe somewhat even facetious examples, but you get the idea. A lot of people are being paid very poorly to do things that are of benefit to ultimately no one except a very tiny group of extremely wealthy people. But that whole subject matter is a topic for another video, and you know, this one is already running quite long as it is. Thank you very much for watching this video. Like, comment, subscribe, share this to your relevant communities, but do not spam them. Consider supporting me on Patreon or Subscribestar, buying some of my merchandise or my short story collection. And in that spirit, I'm back from vacation, as you can see. It was nice hanging out with my grandma for a couple days. I hope y'all are doing fine, and see you around, cunts.